Canada has a vastly diverse geographic landscape, and its cultural diversity mirrors that spectrum. The Imagineers considered nature to be the essential thematic focal point of this beautiful country, and so the pavilion primarily showcases the natural landscape, including that of the Canadian Rockies and British Columbia. But the Canada Pavilion also pays homage to many of the cultures you would find when visiting the different Canadian provinces, including that of its native Indigenous tribes, French-Canadian style and architecture, as well as the Scottish influences of the Maritimes. Interestingly, the pavilion was originally meant to include a small forest, and it looks so cool. Disney went as far as to place a number of trees. However, the project's Imagineers never thought that the forced perspective looked quite right, and so they scrapped the forest element. The pavilion hosts 3 native totem poles, the tallest being 30 feet high. 2 are made of fiberglass, 1 is carved out of real wood. They were designed and sculpted by the British Columbian artist David Boxley, whose work was inspired by his Indigenous ancestors. The eagle totem pole tells one of Boxley's favorite cultural tales, in which a boy finds an eagle caught in a net on a beach and frees it. Years later, when hunger strikes the boy's tribe, he walks on the same beach, only to find the eagle there, waiting for him with food, paying him back for his earlier kindness. The whale totem pole depicts the tale of the first potlatch, and it was carved right here in the pavilion, which created a memorable experience for guests who were visiting during that time. Situated within the representation of this native Indian village is the Trading Post and Northwest Mercantile, which are actually one large store, but they have 2 themed entrances. These stores depict the influence of the Indigenous people of Canada's northwest coast, and also call to mind the rugged frontiersmen, trappers, prospectors, loggers, and traders of both French and English descent, who blazed the trail north and westward through the uncharted wilderness. Housewares and rustic supplies adorn the walls, giving you the sense that pioneers from days long ago could show up at any minute. The shops also feature fun, Canadian-themed apparel, wildlife plush, and a drink counter at the back of the Trading Post. The centerpiece of the pavilion is the Hotel du Canada, modeled after the Fairmont Chateau Laurier. This structure is nostalgic, harkening back to the inception of the Canadian Railroad and the hotels that sprang up along their routes as they pursued further frontiers in the vast territory. The Laurier was commissioned by Grand Trunk Railway President Charles Melville Hayes, who tragically perished on the RMS Titanic just weeks before the hotel's scheduled opening. Canada's historic influences are dramatically represented in this little village. One side of the street has a very French-Canadian feel, while the other is representative of the English and Maritime provinces. Can you tell which is which? This area is also one of my very favorite places in Epcot to just get away from the hustle and bustle and relax. Here we are reminded that nature remains a paramount theme of the Canada Pavilion. Just beyond the village, we find a majestic 30-foot waterfall cascading down the pavilion's representation of the Canadian Rockies of Alberta and British Columbia. Note the use of forced perspective here to allow the mountain to appear larger. we follow the winding steps into a narrow canyon and on to Salmon Island. Adjacent to Salmon Island is the Maple Leaf Mine, which hosts the queue area for the Circle Vision film O Canada, as well as an entrance point for the seasonal festival hall. The mine shaft recalls Canada's Klondike era, featuring old mine picks, shovels, and lanterns. The mine is a reference to an actual mine in Nova Scotia, known as Moosehead. While most of the year the theater features a cinematic journey across the Canadian provinces, today we find it converted into Appleseed Orchard, serving ciders and other apple-centric treats. The canyon area is a hidden gem, something you have to purposefully seek out. While it serves as an accessible point to the theater queue, most guests pass by the pavilion without any knowledge of this wonderful escape from the Florida sun. The pavilion's Victoria Gardens were inspired by the famous Butchart Gardens near Victoria, British Columbia. In 1904, husband and wife Robert and Jenny Butchart moved from Ontario to Vancouver Island to build a cement plant on a rich limestone deposit. As cement production exhausted the limestone deposits, Jenny envisioned a grand garden in its place and began transferring topsoil by horse and cart. Little by little, the quarry blossomed. Today, Butchart Gardens is a National Historic Site of Canada and one of Victoria's top tourist attractions. Here in the pavilion's Victoria Gardens, a row of maple trees surround the gardens in honor of the country's national symbol and tree. The gardens are the largest of all 11 World Showcase pavilions. Taking great care, Disney horticulturists acclimated the plant for 2 years before the park opened, and today, garden plantings are changed with the seasons. White flowers are planted during the winter months to emulate a snowy Canadian winter, and remain in shaded areas during the spring months, creating the illusion that they haven't melted yet. While this pavilion doesn't feature a thrill ride or extensive shopping, I actually find that to be part of its allure. The real attraction here is the opportunity to step away from the frenetic activity and into a space that invites you to simply relax and explore. And that's why I consider it to be among my top 3 favorite World Showcase pavilions. On your next visit to Epcot, please consider taking a few minutes or more to wander through this pavilion's incredibly Imagineered areas. Discover the legends and the legacy of the Great White North, and be inspired by its magnificent vistas, idyllic landscapes, and timeless beauty.